Are things even more evil than we thought they were? Are things more evil than we even imagined? Well, today we're going to take a disturbing deep dive because, yes, things are more evil than we thought. In fact, many people are missing the truth behind what's being done out there. And worse yet, even more people are accepting the evil that's taking place right before our eyes. Again, we're going to talk about all this next. Hi, I'm Pastor Dave, and welcome to Interpreting the Times. Well, we've got kind of a tough show to do today, and I'm going to ask you to do me a favor. If you appreciate the material we're putting out, could you go to our YouTube page? Could you like our videos? Could you subscribe to them? Because what that does, that allows the algorithm to get other people exposed to the truth. What we are trying to do is bring truth to people out there who may very innocently be deceived, who may not understand what's happening. And there are some out there who have a deep understanding of what's happening. But either side, I want to make sure that we get as much truth out to as many people as possible. And the way that you can help with that is by going to our YouTube page, going to our website, liking, subscribing, and just telling people what's going on. Because, folks, things that are out there are so evil that they're not even trying to hide it anymore. And I want to bring some things to the forefront. But before I do this, let's look at a biblical perspective. Everything has to be built on Scripture. Before I get into Scripture, I want to read some verses. But before I do that, let me show you a quick video because it goes back to the Canaanites. You know, sometimes when people come to me and they're reading the Bible, they try to read the Old Testament, they get confused because they say, why did God tell the Israelites to remove the Canaanites from the land? And when he said remove them, he said, purge the land of all of them, men, women, children, even the animals. How could a kind, loving God want even women and children and animals, innocent animals, purged from the land? Well, you have to understand the Canaanites, what they were doing. And to really explain that, let me show you a real quick video. Watch this video.
What kind of civilization would build temples, not to worship life, but to take part in extreme and disturbing rituals? When the Bible says God commanded Israel to completely remove the Canaanites from a land, many people ask, why would a loving God order something so severe? Tonight, we uncover the truth. Who were the Canaanites? Why were their practices considered so corrupt? And what was really happening inside their cities? This isn't just ancient history. It's a story of moral collapse, judgment, and a warning for every generation. And as we dig deeper, you'll see patterns that echo even in modern societies, showing us that the lessons from Canaan are far from irrelevant. Take a moment and imagine the world they lived in. These were not isolated villages, but vibrant, bustling cities filled with trade, ideas, and artistry. People walked the streets, worked in markets, raised families, and contributed to civilization that, on the surface, could be admired. Yet behind closed doors, their moral compass had shifted in ways that the biblical texts describe as extreme.
All right, so in that video, it said the lessons that we can learn from the time of the Canaanites, the lessons are not irrelevant. And I completely agree with that. And also in this video, it said that, Scripture already deals with the Canaanites, that period, and why God commanded them to do what he commanded the Israelites to do, to remove them, to purge the land, because as that video just said, their moral compass, well, it was more than just off base. It was no longer moral. Let's look again. Let's begin with God's word. The material I want to cover today, we need to make sure we understand God's word first. So as we do this, I want to go to Leviticus. Let's go to the very beginning. Leviticus chapter 18, verse 21. You shall not give any of your offspring, you shall not offer any of your offspring to Moloch. Well, who is Moloch? What does that mean? And you shall not profane the name of your God. I am the Lord. So you shall not give any of your offspring, your children, you should not offer them to Moloch. See, Moloch was the god of the Canaanites. And what this was child sacrifice. That they would bring the children to Moloch. And Moloch was a statue whose arms held out this way, and they would have a fire. And they would put the babies, I mean, this is very graphic, but they would put the babies in the arms of Moloch, and the babies would burn to death. They would sacrifice their children. And other verses talk about this. In fact, when I take people to Israel and we're by the Kidron Valley, you have the Mount of Olives up here. Actually, there's three small mountains up here. The Mount of Olives up here, and you've got the Temple Mount, and you've got the Kidron Valley. And that's where this sickness took place, where this dedication, offering of the children to Moloch. And they would place drummers up on the hills, and the drummers would beat their drums so loud that it would drown out the cries of the children, the babies, being burned to death. That's how gruesome and awful it was. So when God said, purge the land of this, remove them, that's what he was saying. Now let's look at Deuteronomy chapter 18, verse 10. There shall not be found among you anyone who makes his son or his daughter pass through the fire. Again, Moloch, pass through the fire. One who uses divinity or practices witchcraft or who interprets a sorcerer. So God is saying we do not put our children, we do not do child sacrifice. You do not put them in the arms of Moloch. We do not put them in the fire. And he says you do not practice witchcraft and you do not, listen to sorcery. Remember that as we get into this topic more today, all that's going to come into play. How about 2 Kings chapter 16, verse 3? I'm reading from the New American Standard Bible, by the way, here. It says, but he, being King Ahaz, but he walked in the way of the kings of Israel and even made his son pass through the fire, according to the abomination of the nations whom the Lord had driven out from before the sons of Israel. The nations the Lord driven out, which were supposed to be the Canaanites. And then Psalm 106, verses 37 to 38, it says, they even sacrificed their sons and daughters to the demons. So they sacrificed their sons and daughters to the demons. So we understand child sacrifice, God's view on that, but we're talking about practicing witchcraft, we're talking about sorcery, we're talking about it all being an abomination, we're talking about demons. Now, why do I bring all this up? Because as I mentioned this, people would say, well, those verses only apply to the Old Testament, right? No, unfortunately not. The things that God was commanding the Israelites not to participate in fact, to completely reject in the Old Testament, is still happening today. What I want to deal with today is a topic that not many people really understand, but those who are in the elite or those who are in the Hollywood circle understand this phrase. There is a phrase, again, very well known with the elite, the top elite, and with those in Hollywood. It's called the karmic law. The karmic law, it's karma, but what is the karmic law? Here's what it is by definition. As long as you tell people what you're doing, it's on them, not on you. So the things that you see take place in Hollywood, I've had people in the elite upper echelon of society tell me before we do things, we tell people that. And many times we will use Hollywood to tell people what we're going to do. So to them, in their mind, as long as I tell you, as long as I put the scene in a movie, as long as I put it in a story and you're exposed to it, then what I do is not on me, it's all on you. If you, quote, if you're too stupid to understand what I'm saying, then it's up to you. It's your fault. This is the way a depraved mind works. This is Romans chapter 1. But this is very common. The thinking is very common with those in high positions of power and with those especially in Hollywood. I can only speak from experience with Hollywood, knowing that that is true. Now, just tell people what you're doing, and it's on them. When I mentioned that, when I told people I was going to do this topic today, I'm going to get into the Epstein files. And when I get into the Epstein files, someone came to me and said, do you remember a movie from 2016, 10 years ago, called The Sausage Party? And I went, I haven't heard of it. No, I'm not aware of it. And they said, you should watch that. If you want to do something on the Epstein files, you should watch that movie. Well, I didn't. I looked it up. I chose not to watch it. Basically, The Sausage Party was the first R-rated animated movie. Why would you have an R-rated animated movie? Well, again, remember, karmic law, if we tell people what we're going to do, we're free. It won't come back upon us. It's on them now. And in this movie, it's about foods in the grocery store, and they're going back and forth and saying what foods will be the chosen ones. It's a mockery of Christianity and a mockery of believing in God. And basically, you have the sausage and the buns, and they get picked up and put in the cart. I watched the trailer. I didn't watch the movie. I did watch the trailer. I have to admit that. I watched the trailer to see what this was about and decided, no way do I want anything to do with this. But so you have the sausage and the buns get put into the cart together, and the buns speak to the sausage, and it says, "I'm so happy that God put our packages together." And then when they get home, they're going to be, fixed for a meal. They're going to have a meal because they're excited about that. And the potato is picked up, and the potato says, quote, "I'm the first one to enter into eternity." And then they start to peel the potato, and language flies and things fly. You go, oh my goodness, what is this movie? And then later on, they have some baby carrots. They're fixing a barbecue, and they have some baby carrots, and the baby carrots begin to roll off the counter, and the woman cooking the meal grabs them with her hand, and she eats the two small baby carrots. And here's the phrase. The sausages all yell and scream out, "Oh no, they're eating children." If I tell you what I'm doing, and you know about it, it's no longer on me. It's all on you. Karmic law. Now, why would I tell you that story? Because again, what I want to talk about is I want to begin with the Epstein files and move into the evil that is right among us. I want you to understand how much evil is right in front of us, and we're either being blind to it because we don't understand it, or we are accepting it into our culture and into our homes. So, the Epstein File Transparency Act, that brought a lot of things out into the open. There's over 3 million, 3 million files that were released from that, but there were certain terms that were used. This is a document here. In fact, well, you can see how much it's redacted. And it has to be redacted because all the names in here are minors. And this particular document is very graphic as far as the details. In fact, I almost wanted to, I like to offer things as a free resource at the end of each show, and I almost went back and said, should we offer this as a download? And as I went through it, it's just too disgusting. It is just too perverted. I wouldn't want to put this in anybody's hands, so I'm not going to offer this as a free gift. I will tell you about it briefly. When these documents came out, there were some things that were pretty prevalent. There were code words that were used. We had code words pizza. We had code word pizza party. We had a code word yummy. What do these things mean? When the powers that be, when the elites were talking, when those involved with Jeffrey Epstein were involved with doing the things, when they were abusing these minors and the things they were doing, the disgusting things they were doing, what did these code words mean? Well, they meant basically sexual abuse and sexual assaults on minors. And again, I don't want to get too graphic, and I don't want to read anything from this. I've unfortunately read this document, so I know what's in it. But let me show you a headline from the New York Post. Even the secular world's talking about this. Here's a headline and a picture from the New York Post talking about 9-year-old girls. Yes, some of the ones that were abused were 9-year-old girls. And when you talk about how disgusting these documents are, they reveal constant sexual abuse. Epstein would have girls come in all underage and ask them to bring other friends. He would pay them to bring their friends in. And again, I don't want to get into the too graphics, but it's very sexual in its nature. And it's evil and it's sickening when you read the truth with this. Now, some code words were used, and you start wondering, okay, what are these code words were? And they basically describe satanic rituals, things that were being done to Satan. It talks about what they were doing. They talked about sacrifice. They talk about cannibalism. Yes, cannibalism. It's in the documents when they talk about this. Some of the accusations that you read through this that are just so outrageous. You say that can't be true. That couldn't really be done. And then you go back to a movie like this Sausage Party and you go, oh no, they're eating the children. Why would you put that in a movie? Why would you put that line there? Unless you understand the karmic law and just tell people what you're doing. That's how perverted, how disgusting, how evil what's taking place is in here. Now, when I looked at this, I thought, well, this is just too unbelievable. I can't believe this. It's so unbelievable, almost. So I went to another secular source. I went to Snopes. Now, I'm not saying that Snopes is perfectly right and that Snopes is 100% correct, but what that is, it was started in 1994, actually in a house in Tacoma, Washington. And it didn't take very long for basically any kind of urban legend to be put through Snopes, and they would say if it's true or it's false. And yes, they have an agenda, and they do lean to the left. But I went on there and said, okay, the stuff that we're seeing in paperwork like this, and argument in files like this, is it true? Well, even Snopes says yes. When you put this in there, and I said, is the claim of satanic rituals, the claim of human sacrifice, the claim of cannibalism, is that true? And I'll show you on the screen here. Snopes comes back up and says, yes, it's true. In fact, one of the documents talks about ritual sacrifice, and one of the DOJ, Department of Justice departments, or in one of the documents here, this is from the DOJ, and it's to the FBI, basically. This is an FBI interview from 2019, and it's a man who claims he witnessed, satanic rituals on a yacht, Epstein's yacht. And that's what this interview is here. And basically, through the interview, he claims that he saw the sacrifices. He's telling an FBI agent, and the FBI agent reports it to the DOJ. I have the file name and number up at the corner, so I pulled off the right document here, make sure I did that. And they were saying that that there was sacrifices taking place, and that this man witnessed this. And again, I have it highlighted, but it's so disgusting and so evil. I am not going to read that. But they're talking about cannibalism. They're talking about the abuse of children. This is how evil and disgusting it is. Now, you may say, well, I would never follow anything like that. I would never listen to anything like that. I would never want anything to do with anybody who believes or participates in that. I say amen to that. But my concern is that some of us are. And I'm trusting and hoping it's being done innocently, that we're not aware of what's going on behind the scenes. Because when you start to mention things like cannibalism, again, the Epstein library, 3 million documents. No, I have not read all the documents. But I do know that going through these, that at least 52 times the word cannibal is listed, and at least 6 times this talks about cannibalism, things that actually took place. So we have that in multiple places in the Epstein files. And basically, in one conversation, one of the documents, I don't have that document with me, but I was reading it, in one conversation between Epstein and a man named Richard, that's all it has is Richard in the document. It's an email from Epstein to Richard. And he talks about jerky, that he wanted to get some jerky, and he talked about a restaurant called Cannibal. Let's go to Cannibal and get some jerky. And the way that was being portrayed is that they were going to go wherever they were going, the yacht, the house, wherever, and they were going to have jerky, human flesh, at the restaurant called Cannibal. Again, that's just in written documents that's been released in these Epstein files. Now remember, let me show you a picture here. Remember karmic law. If I tell you I'm doing it, it's off me, it's on you if you don't speak up and do anything about it. Now, let's transition. We have the Epstein files, and again, they're just too graphic, they're too evil, they're too disgusting to even go into. But let me bring you into modern day world, and let me say what's taking place here. The evil that's taking place here is widespread. I'm going to bring you to a podcast. It's called The Last Podcast on the Left. Now, why am I picking on this podcast? Well, I'm going to show you a picture here. This is a well-known actor. If you saw The Wolf of Wall Street, not a movie I've seen, but I know the picture. He's been in many films. He is one of 3 hosts on The Last Podcast on the Left. Let me show you a picture of their logo here, basically. And you can go online and look at that. In fact, for a while, they were only on Spotify, but now they're on more. In fact, they actually tour. This Last Podcast on the Left actually has touring dates where you can go and watch them on tour. And let me put another screenshot from their website here. It says, subscribe if you dare. And you see it in blood red there. Subscribe to our podcast if you dare. Well, what is so bad about listening to this podcast? It's just a podcast. Well, the opening theme of this podcast, it features a snippet from Jeffrey Dahmer, who mass murderer and all the evil that he did. And they used the line, that's when the cannibalism started. That's the opening line often for the podcast. That's from Jeffrey Dahmer. That's when the cannibalism started. And when the podcast ends, oftentimes they end the podcast with these words: Hail Satan. The beginning, cannibalism; the ending, Hail Satan. And people are flocking to this, watching this podcast. It's so popular that now they're actually doing it, traveling, and you can go watch them live and do their show. It's supposed to be a spoof on horror, but again, karmic law. If we just tell them what we're doing, it's off us. There's nothing coming back on us. Now, let me take you to some music. Let me take you to some things that you might have grown up with, might have been very popular. There was an artist named David Bowie. Yeah, how many people know David Bowie? Well, David Bowie is his stage name, by the way. That is not his real name. But he said that he practiced the occult quite often. And he said that the thin white duke was his most favorite alter ego. Now, what does that mean? I'm putting a headline up here and showing you a picture of David Bowie with the headline being the thin white duke is his favorite alter ego. Now, he would read and pour through books that were written by Aleister Crowley. Aleister Crowley of the occult, a Satanist basically. And one of Crowley's favorite books that Bowie would read was called White Stain. I'll show you a picture here. This is a picture of the book. Aleister Crowley's writing this, a Satanist, an occultist, and it's supposed to be poems. Who wants to read poems by this? But Bowie would read this quite often, and he would actually took a line from the book, and again from the book White Stains, which I'm showing you here, and on his album, I'll show you the album cover. Remember albums back then? The album Hunky Dory. Well, in that album, David Bowie gave credit, and he kind of shouted out this occultist, Aleister Crowley, and he said, "I'm closer to the golden dawn." As Bowie would sing that, "I'm closer to the golden dawn," what that was a shout out supporting and recognizing Aleister Crowley and his book on poetry on Satanism and the occult. Now, what does this mean? Now, the song that he did this in, most popular, was called Quicksand. David Bowie's song, Quicksand. You may or may not be familiar with it, but again, it's in his music. And this is what he's reading, this is what he's believing, this is what he's doing. Well, what is this golden dawn? Let me show you a picture of it. You can see it looks like a cross with a rose in it. That's what the logo to it is. The Golden Dawn is a secret society, and it has its roots in Freemasonry. So the Freemasons was the beginning, the foundation, and the Golden Dawn came out of Freemasonry. And basically, it's a devotion and a study to the occult. So the Golden Dawn is a study of the occult. Basically, that's what Crowley used to write his book, and that's what David Bowie used to go out and write songs on and to sing and to have how many thousands and millions of people listen to his music. Again, the evil is so prevalent and so widespread. How much do we understand of this? When you look at the present day Wicca, witches, the rituals that Wicca uses, they say they get the foundation of that, back to the Golden Dawn, which goes back to Aleister Crowley, which goes back obviously to the occultism and Satanism. But again, it's still, the Golden Dawn happened in the late 1900s, in the early 2000s. So basically 100 years old with that. Tarot cards come from that. Let me show you another picture here. The Golden Dawn tarot cards. You can actually go on Amazon, I think, and buy tarot cards if you want, and you'll see the Golden Dawn logo and symbol on that, going back to that. Now, for the younger audience, and again, I'm not familiar with this woman's music, but you have Azealia Banks. Now, she's a rapper. Not my genre of music that I like to listen to, but why am I bringing her up? I'm bringing her up because I'm going to show you an article here from People magazine. And again, I'm using secular sources here. I'm not going out and using some kind of right-wing Christian literature. No, I'm using Snopes. I'm using People magazine. I'm using, CBN. I'm using secular groups who are recognizing this. And People magazine, here's the headline. It says that Banks cleans blood-stained room she used to practice witchcraft for 3 years. And her quote is, "Real witches do real things." And if you look online with the People magazine article, basically she has this room in her apartment or whatever it is that she's living in. I believe it's in an apartment. And it's just disgusting because she was sacrificing animals. And for 3 years, she was sacrificing animals in satanic rituals. And she says, she has to clean this blood-stained room that for 3 years has been used to sacrifice animals. And she says, well, witches will do what witches do. People magazine puts that out there. And again, another one is a group called Godsmack. And you have the lead singer here, Sully Erna. And he says, well, I never wanted to be the poster child for witchcraft, but that's the title that he had. He becomes the poster child for witchcraft. And how many people, knowing that is what they claim him to be, he's the poster child for witchcraft, how many people are listening to Godsmack in their music? Again, not a group I understand, not a group I listen to. I can't tell you about their music, but I can tell you about their belief system. And what I can tell you, folks, is that the evil is so present and it's so popular and it's being picked up by our kids and our grandkids. And it's go much deeper than I think we ever imagined. All this is not just new stuff. Let me take you back quite a ways to Sammy Davis Jr. Does that name ring a bell to you? The Candyman can. I remember in the 70s that song coming out. I think my mother used to sing that song. The Candyman can. I had no idea what it meant. I'm not sure she has any idea what it meant. But Sammy Davis Jr. Was a Satanist. How do we know that? Why are you saying that? Pastor Dave, how do you know? Well, let's go to his memoir. Let me show you a picture of his book right here. It's called Why Me? And in this book, his memoir, Why Me, this is what Davis writes. He says, I wanted to have every human experience. The Church of Satan was a perfect fit, full of free drugs and freer orgies, end quote. That's what Davis writes in his memoirs, Why Me? And he talks about being involved with that. Now, if you don't think he was, let me show you another picture here. This is a trail, this is a poster, a one sheet for a TV show called Poor Devil. What Sammy Davis Jr. did was he put together a TV pilot, i.e. Poor Devil. It's about a demon. The whole TV pilot, the whole show is about a demon trying to get a promotion. That's what the whole thing is. You see a picture on the one sheet there of Sammy Davis Jr. being a demon trying to get promoted with this. And when you look at this, it promotes the Church of Satan. It has pentagrams. It talks about the Church of Satan. In fact, Anton LaVey, who is the founder of the Church of Satan, he came out and he said, referring to Davis's show, The Poor Devil, he said, this is a, quote, magnificent commercial for the Church of Satan. That's what it's saying. In fact, the Church of Satan offered Sammy Davis an honorable second-degree membership, which they said he was only too happy to receive and to accept. Read his memoirs. Davis left the Church of Satan in 1974. Why did he do that? Well, he says, again, quoting from the book, he says, one morning after a covering that wasn't all fun and games. I wonder what kind of ritual they were doing that wasn't all fun and games. Again, let me use some educated speculation here. Was there a sacrifice? Was something killed? Human, animal? I don't know. But Davis saw this and said, after that, what took place there, okay, that wasn't fun and games. He said, I got some nail polish remover and I took off the red fingernail polish. Apparently, the red fingernail polish acknowledged him as a member of the Church of Satan and as a member of this group. And he took it off after what he witnessed in 1974. And then, believe it or not, he went back to Judaism. He wasn't a Jew. He converted to Judaism, and he claimed to be Jewish until the day he died. All right, how about a song called Stairway to Heaven? Remember that song? Well, Jimmy Page, Led Zeppelin, Jimmy Page was the one who wrote the lyrics to Stairway of Heaven. And it's interesting. Some people will call it a song about fate. Let me not put words in people's mouth. Let me show you a real quick video again of, okay, Jimmy Page wrote the lyrics. However, when you look at Robert Plant wrote the music. So Plant wrote the music and Page wrote the lyrics, and it came together. Let me show you a recent interview of Robert Plant as he talks about Stairway to Heaven.
Now, it's Stairway to Heaven. A lot of people consider it the most classic song of Led Zeppelin time. But it's my understanding that, well, you will perform it, It's not your favorite thing to perform.
Well, it's not. No, it's not about it being my favorite or not. It's nothing. It's nothing to do with that, really. It's just that it belongs to a particular time. If I had been involved in the instrumentation, I would feel that it's a magnificent piece of music which has its own character and personality. It even speeds up in a similar way to some pieces of more highbrow music. But my contribution was to write lyrics and to sing a song about fate and something very British, almost abstract. But they were coming out of the mind of a 23-year-old guy, you know, and it landed in the years and the era of 23-year-old guys. And I think as time goes on, you find that you may find another period of your life has got a little bit more substance or is more relative later on down the line, you know. So as much as I like it, I'm not wedded to that whole deal now.
All right, there you go. You know, and as you see, that again, a secular group interviewing, you know, the artist here, basically about the song, and they claim that "Stairway to Heaven" was, quote, the best song in rock and roll history. What is it about? It's not about heaven. It's nothing that glorifies God. And when you look at this again, now as this man has become older, he says, yeah, well, you know, when I was 23, we were 23 writing that song, that was one thing. But now as he gets older, all he says was, well, now I have a different perspective. He doesn't claim that he disagrees with it, doesn't claim that he sees it different. I mean, he doesn't claim that he's going to reject it. He just says, I have a different perspective on that. And he doesn't dive into it, nor is he pushed to. It'd be interesting if the interviewer there pushed him a little bit, asking about the different perspective that he has. But let's talk about Jimmy Page for a second. Again, the one who wrote the lyrics to Stairway to Heaven. Remember Aleister Crowley, the Satanist, the occultist, you know, the one that David Bowie was attracted to and following and promoting? Well, Jimmy Page actually bought his house. Not David Bowie's house. He bought Aleister Crowley's house. Let me show you a picture here. This is the house that he bought. And back in the 1970s, Jimmy Page of Led Zeppelin bought Aleister Crowley's house to live in it because he wanted to be closer to Aleister Crowley. You know, and as he was there, he says, this is where Crowley, the original owner, Aleister Crowley, this is where, quote, he conducted rituals from the book of Aberlin. What's Aberlin? You know, well, this book, again, I'll show you on the screen here, the picture, cover of the book. Well, this book is about a story about a man named Abraham. And Abraham goes to Egypt. And when he goes to Egypt, he meets a magician. And the magician teaches him magic. And then Abraham comes back and he has a chosen child, and he teaches the chosen son, his chosen son, magic. And the father and son, based on magic, is able to go and, you know, bring magic rituals around the world. Well, Abraham, going to Egypt, the father of the chosen son, do you see the satanic, the Satan counterfeit of the true Bible story of Abraham? Going down to Egypt, you know, a magician, counterfeit, you know, that's what this book's about. And with this book, that is what Jimmy Page was saying Aleister Crowley was reading and performing rituals in this house. And I want to be in this house reading this book, doing exactly what he did. In a 1975 interview, again, it goes back 50 years. In a 1975 interview, Page talked about his house. And he said, quote, strange things have happened in that house. Do you think? And he says, the bad vibes were already there. He just enjoyed them. The bad vibes were already there. What about people who are married to witches? But we're not going to say they practice witchcraft, but what about those who are married to witches? And I bring that up because, again, from a secular source, this is from CBS News. CBS News did a story on Tom Brady. And Tom Brady, how do you win so many football games? And Tom Brady says he believes that his wife, when you look at this, his wife, she calls herself a witch. And she says she built an altar in his locker. And it was a picture of had stones and a picture of kids. And If he focused on this altar, then Tom Brady would have these powers that would allow him to go out and be protected, to be safe so he wouldn't get injured, and to win football games. And Tom Brady believed that whatever she did as a witch, it had power behind it. Again, this is from CBS News. This is not from, some kind of Christian sports thing. CBS News is saying this. And here's the headline. I got the headline up here. And Gazelle says to him, "You're lucky you married a witch, but I'm a good witch." We'll just leave it at that. A witch is a witch. Now, another show I have not seen is called, New Housewives. And the housewives, I guess they have them of, New Jersey or where. I won't even try to play with it. I don't watch the show. But here's another one. And she comes out and talks about the life of a witch. So she is going to be on this show, and she's going to publicly come out and say, "I am living the life of a Wiccan." And we're going to put her on national TV, and people are going to watch, the Housewives. And I don't know which Housewife she was on, but that's one of the shows. Another, again, I'm showing you examples, and I could spend hours bringing hundreds of examples to you. I'm just trying to touch all the bases on people. Do you listen to rap? Do you listen to rock and roll? Do you watch these kind of shows, these reality shows, what they are? So I'm trying to touch as many touch points as possible, saying this is across the board. This evil is across the board. It's not just one thing. It's not just rock and roll music. It's not just rap. It's not just, these type of shows. It's everywhere. Vanessa Hudgens told In Style magazine, again, a secular magazine, In Style, she says, "I was filming The Princess Switch 2 or 3, and I had my first conscious witchy awakening. I was learning about the history of the women who were wrongfully accused of witchcraft and learning that witchcraft and what it is." And then she goes down and she says she wanted to keep this private, she said, but then she decided to film the documentary Dead Hot. Dead Hot. And she says what this does, it follows the spiritual journey of the witches of Salem. And she interviews witches, mediums, and those who will experience with Ouija boards and learn about spiritual boxes. Going back to the scriptures we opened up, and God said, do not do that. So they are going out interviewing people who are doing that. And let me show you again. Here's 2 one-sheets of the Dead Hot Witch is what it's called. This is this interview took place in 2023, somewhat recently. And with Today on the Today TV show in 2023, she said she's been dabbling in the occult for a long time. Again, this is Vanessa on the Today Show in 2023. "I've been dabbling in witchcraft or occult for a long time." And she said, "I regularly saw a ghost in my last house, her former house. And she uses witchcraft," she says, "to, quote, manifest relationships." How do you have a relationship? I manifest that through witchcraft. She's publicly saying that, and people are still watching her. Now, let me show you a picture here. Here's a headline, basically. Lana Del Rey confirms attempt to use witchcraft against Donald Trump. And again, this is a secular publication, and she's saying, so when this headline came out, I thought, okay, well, who is Lana Del Rey? So I had to go back. And again, it's a stage name. It's not her real name. Her real name is Elizabeth Woolridge Grant. Elizabeth Grant is her real name, but Lana Del Rey is her stage name. She's 40 years old. She's been nominated for Grammys. Let me show you a background. Does this look like somebody who's a witch? Does this look like somebody who's going to practice these rituals? What does this look like to you when you hear her and see her? Watch this real short clip. go. Does she seem like a normal 40-year-old nominated for a Grammy Award? But yet she comes out and says that she's using witchcraft against Donald Trump. When she says that, what happens? Well, let's nominate her for a Grammy. Again, I'm telling you, the evil is so prevalent. What we're seeing in the Epstein files, what we're hearing about in the Epstein files, it's going everywhere. It's just not, and again, that stuff is so disgusting. And to do anything against children like that, anyhow. Elle magazine, again, another secular source, published stories about entertainers who publicly proclaim to be what? Witches. Here's the headline. 13 celebrities who are low-key witches. And they're no longer low-key, and I'm not going to go into the names and go and cover all 13 names here, but the magazine did. All right, karmic law, remember that. If I tell you what I'm doing, it's no longer on me. It's not going to come back. There's not going to be any karma coming back against me. It is now on you because I told you what I'm doing. Karmic law. Back to the Epstein files. When we go back to that, again, whether things took place on his private island in St. Thomas in the Caribbean, or it took place in New York or in New Mexico or any of his house, Palm Beach, we've seen actors, we've seen musicians, possibly athletes. What about world leaders? What about politicians? Were any of them, as we go through this, we do see names of people. And what about world leaders and politicians? Is this even there? Well, of course it's there. Larry Summers, who was both in the Clinton and Obama administration, so he was both in the administration, he came out, and this is one of the emails that was released. He says, I'm trying to figure out why the American elite think if you murder your baby for beating and abandonment, it must be irrelevant to your admission to Harvard. You want to kill your baby? Fine, let's put you in Harvard. He goes on, but hit on a few women 10 years ago, and you can't work on a network or in a think tank. Okay, you know what? If I hit on a woman, if I'm trying to seduce a woman, then I cannot be on a network show or into a public think tank. But I can go out and kill all the babies I want, and I can get to go to Harvard. That's what he's saying. And then in the email to Epstein, he says, do not repeat this insight. So this is somebody in the Obama administration and the Clinton administration saying, you can go out and do this, but if you touch a woman, and they're doing a lot more than that, then you get blackballed for that. That was basically the thinking behind that. What about the karmic law? And then you have, obviously, Prince Andrew. We'll show some pictures here again. These were publicly released, nothing I dug up. These were public released where he sexually assaulted a woman here. In fact, we know that he was stripped of his title. He's lost that. And then there's one more that's interesting. This was done by Alpha News in Minnesota. And again, this goes everywhere. And you have Amy Klobuchar here. I might be messing her name up here, but she's being criticized. She's running for governor now of Minnesota because now that's open. And she has, again, this is an article. I'll show you the headline here. Basically, where you have Reid Hoffman, who is the founder of LinkedIn. Apparently, he was part of the Epstein problem. Now, we're not saying what he did or where he's involved in, but he's funding the campaign for the woman running for governor of Minnesota. So again, you see it everywhere, folks. I just want you to understand how deep the evil runs. And some of us may be listening to music, be watching movies, be watching TV shows, following actors, whatever, and thinking it's okay, but knowing what their belief system is. There is an agenda there. There is a purpose behind there, what they want to portray. You understand, now you go back and you just look at a trailer to the Sausage Party. Again, the language they use is terrible. Why would you have that kind of language in an animated film? Well, they're trying to tell us what's being done behind the scenes, because if I publicly say it, then I'm off the hook. And that's not true. So as a resource, I always want to resource you. So what we've put together here, I've recently put together a spiritual discernment for an evil world. I want to make sure that we can get this into your hands. So I want you to click on the description below, and we will get this sent to you. What this is going to be, it's going to be a discernment checklist. It's going to be a discernment checklist, also going to give you some warning signs, so you can say, wait a minute, I'm not so sure what they're saying really. What do they really mean? What are these code words? What did pizza? What did yummy? What did those code words mean It meant child abuse. It meant possibly child sacrifice, possibly cannibalism, those type of things. But I want to make sure you get this discernment checklist. Some of the things we're going to talk about is, if you're watching something or hearing something, does it normalize what Scripture calls evil? We have to understand what Scripture calls evil. That's why I opened with those 4 verses beforehand. How about, does it desensitize you to violence, to immorality, or to darkness? What you're listening to or watching, does it desensitize you? Does it mock God? Does it mock truth? Does it mock righteousness? Which many of the things being said and done and produced does. Does it promote pride? Does it promote lust? Does it promote self-worship? As they are so proudly coming out and proclaiming, this is who I am and what I do. Does it does it create confusion instead of clarity? Well, I don't know what they're talking about. That's gibberish. Doesn't mean anything. It's just a song. It's just a TV show. No, it's much more than that. And some warning signs I want to bring to you. That was some of the checklists. Some of the warning signs I want you, red flags, basically, that I don't ever want you to ignore. Is sin portrayed as something that is normal or harmless? How many shows now have gay characters on it? Is sin portrayed as normal? Darkness. Is darkness disguised as entertainment? Well, it just has a good beat. What's a fun song? What's a funny show? The last podcast on the left. Well, they just talk about horror movies and talk about mass murderers and talk about those kind of topics, and it's harmless. No, it's not. Again, warning signs. Truth. Is truth labeled as hate? What I'm saying here, am I hating people? What I'm doing, what I want to expose here, is this hate? Well, that's a red flag. That's a warning sign. Does witchcraft, is the theme of witchcraft, is it glorified? You're a witch? Well, what do you do? Well, I'm a good witch. I'm not a bad witch. I'm a good witch. Well, no, there are no good witches with that. Are children being targeted? They're going after our kids. They're going after our kids. I could do a whole teaching on Disney and what's happening there, but going after our kids. Does conviction replace? Well, anything goes. Everybody's okay with that. That's a warning sign. I want to make sure you understand it's a warning sign. The last one is God being removed from the conversation? Oh, we're not going to talk about religion. We're going to keep religion out of it. We're not going to talk about the Bible. Those are warning signs. Anyhow, I want to get this handout to you. It's several pages long. It's a discernment checklist, and it's warning signs for spiritual danger. I just want to get that into your hands so that you have it. And I'm going to really encourage you to spend more time in this book and not worry about this garbage that's being done, because there is that karmic law. If we tell us what's going on, they're free of any kind of wrongdoing. It's all on us. God is still on the throne. God is still in control. We need to be turning towards Him, not towards this worldliness. Anyhow, I know it's deep. I know it's kind of disgusting, but it's true. It's out there, and the evil is more prevalent than we can even imagine. God bless you.